I get it. You want to date. I've been there, in your shoes. My first taste of really dating was all the way back in grade 7. It was the first time that I stepped into a exclusive relationship with someone and experienced the rush of holding hands, hugs, and even first kisses. It actually became a bit of a drug for me. Once that relationship ended, some 6 months down the road, I found myself even more empty and longing for intimacy than I did before. Because now, not only had I experienced the good in dating, that which I'd longed for, feeling loved and valued and accepted and so on, but now I'd felt the painful other half of being rejected and told I was no longer loved anymore. This, for me, began my pursuit of dating relationships from that point on. And for the rest of junior high and high school, I was actually never without a girlfriend in an exclusive dating relationship. I just bounced from one to the next in this endless pursuit and desire for love. Now, this is what we all long for when we start a dating relationship, isn't it? We long for intimacy. We want to feel close to someone. We want to be known and loved deeply, and we want to share our lives with someone else. Now, there isn't anything wrong with longing for intimacy. In fact, it's how you were created. Going back to God's first moment in creation when He made mankind, He knew that man would long for a partner, someone who he could share his life with. And so God created woman to be just that for him. We need to remember that when God created man, He did so in God's image. See, it's God's fingerprint on us because God is a relational God that causes us to long for connection and for intimacy. The reality is, you guys are now at a stage in life where you're noticing one another. I mean, just a few years ago, guys and girls were gross, right? But now, not so gross anymore, right? We find ourselves craving something different in the relationships with the opposite sex. And this, combined with our God-given desire for intimacy, leads us to a place of starting to pursue dating relationships. Now, this week, I want to guide our conversation around dating in this relationship series alongside a story that's found in the Bible that we typically don't go to on the whole topic of dating. But I believe this story has massive insights to share with us when it comes to the idea of our pursuit and longing for intimacy. It's the story of the woman at the well from John chapter 4. I'd encourage you, if you have a Bible with you or a Bible app, go there and follow along. At the beginning of the chapter, we see Jesus is continuing along in his ministry and he's moving from Judea heading up to Galilee. And in verse 4, it tells us that Jesus had to go through Samaria on the way. Now, we can't read this as Samaria is on the way from Judea to Galilee or in between them. That's not what this verse is saying. Instead, the words had to in this verse refers to this burning need and desire for Jesus to stop in Samaria. It was of utmost importance for Jesus to go there. So Jesus had to get to Samaria. Now, Jewish people did not get along with Samaritan people. It had been that way for centuries. They were former Jews who had abandoned their faith and combined it with the faith of the Assyrians, becoming what would later be known as Samaritans. The Bible tells us that Jesus had to go there. Those reading this would have spit the soup out of their mouth at this. Jews don't go to Samaria, but Jesus says he has to go there. You see, for Jesus, your past, it doesn't matter. Or where you come from, or where you've been, or what small group you're in. It doesn't matter how you feel about him or about yourself, whether you hate him, love him, or are running from him. Nothing. Jesus has to come to you. That's what we very clearly see here. It's the passionate pursuit of love from God to us, his people. And we need to sit on that for just a moment. Because one thing I'm convinced of is this: you will never be able to love someone the way that that person deserves and desires to be loved until you first experienced and stepped into God's love for you. See, it's His love and our living into that love that puts us in a place where we're able to love others. Without it, we love inappropriately, selfishly, and ultimately will be let down and letting others down. So the story goes on. Jesus sets off to Samaria. Verse 5, eventually he came to the Samaritan village of Sychar near the field that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired from the long walk, sat wearily beside the well about noontime. Soon a Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Please give me a drink." He was alone at the time because his disciples had gone into the village to buy some food. The woman was surprised, for Jews refused to have anything to do with Samaritans. She said to Jesus, "You're a Jew and I'm a Samaritan woman. Why are you asking me for a drink?" Jesus replied, "If you only knew the gift God has for you and who you're speaking to, you'd ask me and I would give you living water." Now this woman doesn't know it yet, but Jesus is not speaking of the same type of water that's in the bottom of that well. Jesus wants to prime the pump, so to say. And so he starts this conversation with her, pointing towards what it is that she's truly after. Another quick note for us to pick up on is this: she's coming to get water from this well around noon. And this is important for us to pick up on. It means that this woman was not coming to draw water for herself at a time of day when anyone else would have been there to draw water. Drawing water meant a long hike to the well and a long hike back with all that added weight of water in tow. These trips were normally done early in the morning or later in the evening when the day had cooled. This woman showed up at the hottest time of the day, and she was alone. This was also unusual, as women normally would have traveled together to get water. This woman was clearly avoiding people and didn't want to be around anyone else. Or maybe had been given the idea that she wasn't welcome from the others. But the story goes on. Verse 11, "But sir, you don't have a rope or a bucket," she said, "and this well is very deep. Where would you get this living water? And besides, do you think that you're greater than our ancestor Jacob, who gave us this well? How can you offer better water than he and his sons and his animals enjoyed?" Jesus replied, "Anyone who drinks this water will soon become thirsty again. But those who drink the water I give will never be thirsty again. It becomes a fresh, bubbling spring within them, giving them eternal life." "Please, sir," the woman said, "give me this water. Then I'll never be thirsty again, and I won't have to come here to get water." In these verses, we discover something that I believe most of us can relate to. Twice we see the woman not understanding the spiritual significance of what Jesus is saying and offering. She was trying to satisfy only a physical desire, thirst, and as such, she's blinded by the offer to have a full and final desire satisfied. Her practical question, "But sir, you don't have a rope or a bucket and this well is very deep," indicates that she was only thinking about liquid water. And in verse 15, when she understood that Jesus was offering a better type of water, she was still thinking only in terms of physical thirst that's quenched by liquid. And the irony is that there before her was the answer to her deepest desires, God in flesh. And all that she could think of in that moment was about a drink. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I can totally relate to this. I can get so caught up by trying to fill my own desires and wants and needs with everything else under the sun, fully knowing and expecting them to only temporarily sedate my need, while all the while available for me is something so much better. It's God and His love and His purpose and His plan and His identity for me. And so knowing this, and knowing that the woman was still not seeing it clearly, we see Jesus lean right in and reveal to her what He wanted to provide for her. Look at verse 16. He says, "Go and get your husband." "I don't have a husband," the woman replied. Jesus said, "You're right, you don't have a husband. For you've had 5 husbands, and you aren't even married to the man you're living with now. You certainly spoke the truth." Now, translated, this means this. He says, "My dear woman, you've been looking for meaning and belonging and purpose in all the wrong places. You searched and entered into relationship after relationship, man after man after man after man after man. And clearly you can see now that a relationship with a man is not what your soul longs for to be satisfied. You find yourself coming up empty each and every time, and you're actually doing it again right now. And as a result of this pursuit of love and sex, you've been cut off from the rest of your community. You're now lonely. You come here alone, hoping to avoid contact with anyone. See, you desire a relationship, and yet you can't have it because you have a love affair with relationship. Don't you get it? You won't be satisfied, and you cannot be satisfied by this. How much longer are you going to chase after things that continue to leave you feeling more empty than you were before?" Now, I don't know about you, but I feel that interaction reaching into the depths of my own soul and calling me to something more, something bigger, something better. So Jesus speaks right into the depths of this woman's soul. And then all of a sudden, the woman kind of turns things around and she starts to have this conversation with Jesus about this time that she understands is coming, a time when God will send a messenger to make things clear and make things known to his people, which is so ironic, right? As Jesus is sitting there listening to her describe him. Verse 25, the woman said, "I know that the Messiah is coming, the one who's called Christ, and when he comes, he will explain everything to us." Then Jesus told her, "I am the Messiah." Now, I imagine for the woman, it finally just clicks. She gets it. In her heart, it actually skips a beat as she understands now the magnitude of the conversation and interaction that she just shared with God in flesh. The offer to have her thirst finally and totally satisfied now has more weight behind it than before. So let's look at the end of the story. Verse 27. Just then his disciples came back. They were shocked to find him talking to a woman, but none of them had the nerve to ask, "What do you want with her?" or "Why are you talking to her?" The woman left her water jar beside the well and ran back to the village, telling everyone, "Come and see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could he possibly be the Messiah?" So the people came streaming from the village to see him. I love this visual at the end of this story. The woman leaves without her bucket. Now, granted, she would need to come back for it eventually as she still needs it to drink water. But it finally clicks within her that this conversation and this invitation that she's been having, what she's been longing and thirsting for her whole life, has just been shared with her. And so she's so pumped and excited that she just drops her bucket and runs to town. A town that would have shunned her, that she didn't belong in. And she starts just telling other people about what it is that she's heard. I mean, it just had to be shared because it was that good. Okay, so what on earth does all this have to do with dating? Well, a lot, actually. First, we clearly see that this was a woman who longed for intimacy. She was desperate for it. She'd spent much of her life bouncing from relationship to relationship, trying to satisfy that desire. And the answer was clear when she had this interaction with Jesus, and he told her, "What you need, what you're truly longing for is me and my love." At the beginning of our time, we talked about our need to first encounter and experience the love of God so that we can be ready and able to experience and share love with others. It has to go in that order. If it doesn't, we end up like the woman, unsatisfied, empty, and lonely in our pursuit for connection. The second thing we clearly see in this story should be a bit of a warning, and that is, don't sacrifice your community for the sake of exclusive intimacy. This was the woman's story. She was totally alone, other than the current man back at her house. She didn't have anyone else. And there's so much irony, because what she truly longed for was connection, but it drove her to isolation. This is one of the practical dangers in pursuing exclusive dating relationships. We can sacrifice our bigger and broader community. And we get this, right? I mean, how many of us have ever said before, that friend, he ditched us for that girl, or she ditched us for that guy? Now, you might find that funny when we say it like that, but honestly think about it. What happens to us? And where do we fit when that exclusive relationship comes to an end? See, if we haven't been wise about it, oftentimes we find that we don't fit back into that community once that relationship is over. We end up longing for either a new community or another exclusive dating relationship to try and fill that void. See, guys, you are loved by God. That's first. And then comes your ability to love others the way that they deserve. And so with that in mind, and a desire to not exclude community around us, let's wrap up with 3 common dating questions. First, when can I date? Now, easy. I just said it. Once you've first experienced and understood that your true intimacy and longing for connection comes from God and not from others, then you're ready to date. However, as we mentioned in the previous session about parents, if your parents have requests that you wait until a certain time or age, then you actually also have to honor their decisions as well. Now, you can have a conversation with your parents to discuss this further, but ultimately you are called first to honor them. Secondly, who should I date? Simply put, you should date someone who's like you and feels the same way about dating and faith and the world as you do. The reality is you are the sum of, or who you are is made up of, the closest relationships to you. And so if you don't want to lose yourself, make sure you date someone who believes and thinks and acts the same way you do. And lastly, why should I date? Now, here's the deal. At its core, dating is an opportunity to discover and find chemistry for the purpose of lifelong intimacy in the context of marriage. It's actually a really big deal. It's why your parents oftentimes want you to wait to be at an age where you can understand the bigness of it all. So let me put it really bluntly. If you know that you're not in a place to date well, would you save yourself and the other person the heartache and just wait? Now, next week, we're gonna have a bit of a part 2 to this conversation as we tackle the age-old question on boundaries of how far is too far. So stay tuned.